you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I will say I have two screens, so I'm going to be looking in two different directions at a time, but if that's distracting, I apologize. I want to go ahead and my name is Morgan Pruitt, introduce myself. I'm the Outreach and Assessment Librarian. This is my first year at Central Carolina Community College. So you get to sort of see through this presentation the things that worked well and things that I made mistakes on and how we can improve for the future. I will say that you probably are going to want to have a couple of pens or pencils or crayons and some paper nearby, because we will be doing a small, slight visual literacy activity that you probably have already done before, but we would view it through the framework of visual literacy rather than maybe a previous framework that you've used. Oh, and if you have questions, just drop them right in the chat. Like, I love to be interactive, so by all means, say what you need to say. So I want to take a minute for you to just look at this painting that I have here. It's called Good Friends by William Merritt Chase. And I just want you to take a couple seconds to just take it all in, take a look at it. And then I'm going to ask you some questions, and you can drop the answers into the chat if you feel comfortable participating. And then we'll talk about how this all fits into what I'm doing. Okay, so what is going on in this painting? If it helps you kind of also think about it as, what do you think the story is here? A lady and her dog in the backyard, person with a dog, woman and her dog enjoying a day outside. Yep. A garden, summer day. Yeah. She's sitting under the shade in a tree. Good. So what makes you say that? What is it that you see in this painting that indicates what you said? There's dark shadows around her. Yep. Yep, enjoying the pleasant day. That's great. She's petting a dog, grass, a happy dog. Yep. What else do you notice? What else? Yeah, she's facing the flowers instead of the house. Oh, that's a good one, Rebecca. What else do you see? Oh, I thought the fence was ruined at first. Yep, maybe keeping the dogs from getting to her flowers. Oh, that's a good point. Anita hadn't thought of that. There are no other people. Yeah, there's a very old tree on the hill. Oh, yeah, that's a great point. The house seems to be in a valley. It seems like an old Italian villa. Good. Houses and a hill in the distance. Yeah, so you guys are noticing all kinds of things. And this is a strategy that is called visual thinking strategies. And basically, it's the idea of identifying what's going on in the image, what's the evidence for that, and what else do you notice, which is really very useful in thinking about the information search process. What are students finding? What's the evidence to identify this is an academic article or a popular scholarly article or a popular article versus a scholarly article? And then what else do students notice? But the challenge that I really found in incorporating something like this into instruction versus in programming was that in a one-shot instruction session, what we just did takes up time that might be used to search the databases or might be used to help students get comfortable with whatever it is that they need help with finding research on various projects. So in trying to incorporate some of these visual thinking strategies into instruction, it did not work well. So I sort of shifted away from that. I stopped thinking about instruction quite as much in combining that visual literacy and more started to think about the programming aspect of it. You can also do this similar activity with, it's called See, Think, Wonder, and it's from the North Carolina Museum of Art, and they are fantastic. And it's along the same lines. What do you see? What does it make you think about? And what does it make you wonder? The really great thing about visual literacy strategies like what we just did was that there are really no wrong answers. There's not, the students feel like they can contribute. People feel like they can say what they see without necessarily having to give the right answer. So that's really important, I think, for getting students engaged and involved in a conversation about research or about art in general. So the learning outcomes for this presentation are basically to discuss the importance of visual literacy, to identify potential opportunities and challenges. If you were ever to incorporate visual literacy into your library, what would that look like for you at your very particular library in your particular context? Potential campus and community partners for collaboration, and then any new ideas about implementing visual literacy programming might maybe get started here somehow. We can only hope. So the first thing that I want to kind of discuss is why visual literacy to begin with. And it was inspired by the question, what shape is it? An instructor came into the library and was talking about asking their students a question. And they had asked them, what is the shape of this object? And the students had responded with the name of the object. So if I asked you the shape of like a cell phone and you said it's a cell phone, okay, that's not the shape, that's the object itself. What is the shape of the object? And so I started thinking about that question, what shape is it? And then I thought, well, maybe it's not so much that the students don't know or they don't have the ability to identify it. It's maybe just what does this need express? Maybe there needs to be more language and conversation about shapes and visual elements so that students do have more access to that information when it's time to recall it. So the North Carolina Museum of Art provided a continuing education credit for visual literacy, and that was back in the fall. So this question happened in the fall. There was a visual literacy class in the fall. I thought this is just coming together. So I took that continuing education credit and used a lot of what I learned as a way to, what does it look like in a library? I will say most of that content in that continuing education course was really focused for like elementary and high school schools and teachers. So it was kind of taking those examples and really reinventing them for what they can look like in the library. I also noticed in research there was an absence of discussion about visual literacy in a community college library, and so that's sort of the impetus for why I wanted to look at it here in this context. So how do we define visual literacy? It's just the ability to read, interpret, evaluate, share, and create visual images through reasonable and responsible knowledge of behavior. And then also to give meaning to an image or a visual and to interpret meaning from those images and visuals. So you see yourself as a consumer and as a creator. And that was really what I was working towards in when having these activities. Can we work towards that idea of students recognizing that either they already have the ability or start to develop the skills necessary to express that ability? So why should we include it at all? So that was the big question when I was thinking about, I was, oh, this is great. I'm just going to run with this idea. And the sort of afterthought was, why would I have run with this idea to begin with? partially it was the absence of visual literacy discussions in community colleges, but also looking at the ways that art and using visual literacy skills, whether it's doodling or whether it's actually evaluating images for information and meaning, how does that all work to support the student or support the community? So academic success, learning to use visuals rather instead of and complement of the text, which meets the old standards of the ACRL competency for visual literacy. And I'm going to drop those into the chat. Those are the old standards. The new standards were actually approved at the beginning of April, I think. And I'm going to drop those in there as well. They got a nice little update, but this can still be very useful. I think the standards can be very useful in kind of thinking about concrete skills that students really benefit from developing. So learning how to create visuals and meaning, standard 3 and 6. So essentially, these two abilities help to promote a student's academic success because they start to see visuals and meaning as complementing text or traditional text, and start thinking about how they gather information, not just with their words, but also with their eyes. And then I didn't want it to just be, oh, this is so great. They are super successful in school, but they have no way of applying this outside. So I did some research about what is the benefit of visual literacy skills or doodling or engaging with the arts outside of the context of academia. And so it really contributes to lifelong learning and personal enrichment. So there's studies that show that art and engaging in the arts increases longevity and promotes health and wellness. And then brain functions. It improves your ability to think critically and creatively. And so and obviously that's great for problem solving. And that extends well beyond the academic sphere. So that is all my justification and reasoning for why I tried this in the first place. And to give you a little bit more context, here you can see on the screen some things about Central Carolina for why we went in this direction. So it was in spring 2022. Central Carolina Community College has 3 main campuses and multiple sites. And then for most of the programming, what we did was we invited students, faculty, and staff to participate. Community members were invited to particular events, but for the most part, we tried to keep it really concentrated because we wanted to really make sure that they're our major population, and we want to make sure that we're serving them appropriately. So the next thing I want to show you is the timeline. So this is the timeline of when we moved from the first program that we had, the visual literacy workshop in collaboration with the North Carolina Museum of Art. So Kristen Smith is great. She works there. She came in and she discussed visual literacy and the significance of visual literacy and what it means and what it looks like. She did the See, Think, Wonder activity, and everybody really had a good time. And then I moved through these various activities. And then we had an art show, which just actually wrapped up last week. And that art show was an opportunity for faculty and staff to submit, as well as students, for them to submit their artwork and to have it displayed. And then we had basically a gallery or a show where people could come and look at the art. Then we had snacks. We invited the artists to come and talk if they wanted to. Some of them really just did not want to talk about their art, and we said that's totally fine. But we had it all 3 campuses. So it was something that we tried to incorporate across the board so that all of our students could participate. Whereas most of these activities were virtual, not just because it was the pandemic, but we also wanted to capture a larger audience and ensure that something like the visual literacy workshop with NCMA actually reached all 3 campuses and the various multiple sites. So the art show was really a way for people to get engaged. So I'll go ahead and tell you, a lot of this did not work. Some of it was not a failure, but it was not as successful as I could have hoped it would be. But I learned a lot as I went through this timeline and through the various programs that we did. The main thing I will say about the programs is that we provided a few unique opportunities that we hadn't done before. So the visual literacy workshop was very unique. The art show was unique. And then learning Scratch with the library, that was something that the Chatham Community Library does with the younger students, or for the younger patrons, but they don't really do with the older students. So like the college age students or the staff and faculty. And so I thought, wonder if people would be interested in that. So taking some of the things that we might push towards one audience and see if we can reinvent it for another. I will say that I have lots of ideas all the time. And so sometimes this is like a very neat timeline, but sometimes it's like very chaotic up here and then it gets very chaotic out there. And so this really required for me a big challenge of planning and looking future wise and getting all the details down. And so it is a challenge. So you want to think about, I think if you were going to implement something like this, what would that look like for you? Who's going to help you keep hold of the details? How are you going to do that? How are you going to keep up with all of the various things going on? And you probably have great strategies already. So it might be quite easy to implement. I did want to also point out this teaching with visual literacy and library resources. That was basically something where it was a faculty workshop. So we tried to connect visual literacy with what we had here at the library. And that will be important later. So I will say that they were not all successful programs, but that we did get a lot of really successful interactions when we did get interactions. So this is a student's collage. During the copyright and collage activity, we had a copyright handout about what copyright was and how to maintain the appropriate interaction with copyright, particularly with images, and then how to cite them appropriately if you wanted to use images in your work. And then we took all non-copyright images, things that were from the Library of Congress, the Smithsonian, and the National Gallery of Art, all their open access data. We found images that would work, and then we printed them off, and we made buttons, and we let people make collages. We didn't have that many people attend, but the student who made this said that it was very relaxing and she had a great time, and it just felt like she had an opportunity to be creative in a way that she hadn't been before. And so we thought that was very exciting. So some of the opportunities and challenges that I experienced, opportunities that I would encourage you definitely to reach out to your local museums and galleries. The North Carolina Museum of Art is so great. They were so helpful for us. And so I would say if you are near a gallery or near a museum, they might be willing to help you. And they might be willing to say, okay, let's see what we can do to just present on visual literacy at your library. And that can look like a lot of different things. And it doesn't have to just be for community colleges. It could be for any library. You might invite your local museum to come in. I think there's a large faculty buy-in, especially here. There is a lot of flexibility, and I think that the faculty were really interested in the visual literacy in ways that I was not expecting, and the students were not as interested in it. And so I think because faculty are interested, that's a sort of a door that if I wanted to explore more visual literacy instruction, that faculty door is now open, and so we can have that conversation. And it's a really great opportunity for collaboration. So I felt like I was getting to know not only faculty and other people outside of the school, but also to work closely with the library staff here at Central Carolina. Some of the challenges, there is a lot of communication going on. And so there's a lot of things to keep up with. The student buy-in was not as strong as I would have hoped, but I think that has a lot to do with these last 2 points, playfulness and social emotional learning. So let me go back to the timeline really quick. The visual literacy workshop with the North Carolina Museum of Art was originally intended for students. And I had one student sign up about like 2 days before the program started. So that was it. and so I said, yes, faculty can come, staff can come, community can come. Anybody wants to sign up for this program can be there. And then when it opened up to everybody else, faculty and staff jumped right on board. And so when we had the actual program, we had like 13 people there or something like that. They were all faculty and staff. And the result at the end of the program was they were like, oh, this was really fun. This was a new thing. We never get to do something like this. And so it was that opportunity of novelty and playing with information. So your visual literacy is something that's new and fresh and exciting. And so it feels like play. It feels like you're not actually having to learn something. You don't have to be lectured at. You can just explore and be creative. And so what I had intended for students to learn, they were less interested in, but faculty saw this as an opportunity to play. And so if I were to do more of this visual literacy programming in the future, then I would center all of the activities that we did for students around the concept of play and around the concept of playfulness. And then also social emotional learning. The North Carolina Museum of Art had another continuing education credit, which I took, which was social emotional learning as it interacts with art. And it was very informative because visual literacy and art, I tend to think about it in the sense of like, how much can we think about this and break it down to its most, finest nuanced points. And you only really think about it, it's just your intellect. Whereas a lot of students, I think, and I think a lot of patrons in general, are looking at accessing that information and that visual literacy through an emotional lens, through this is the way it makes me feel, this is what it makes me wonder. And I was kind of resistant to that at first. And I think that was a challenge for me. That was my own personal challenge. And the result was that was a door that I sort of admittedly kept closing. Like, no, I want to know what you think, not what you feel. I think going back and moving forward, that has to be one of those things that we incorporate more effectively, is that social emotional learning. So I connected with the North Carolina Museum of Art and partnered with for the visual literacy presentation. And then we partnered with all 3 libraries to do the art in the library show. That was very successful, but I think now that we've done it, if this is something that we want to do in the future, here are some potential future partners that I think could really work. The student activities, they're great here at Central Carolina. Katie Jones is in charge of them and she's amazing. The Red Clay Review, which actually is our arts and literary magazine. And Dr. Andrew Walzer, he asked me if I could invite the artists to submit their work. And so it was another opportunity for artists to take their work a little bit further beyond just doing stuff in the library. It was actually a way to sort of get a broader audience and get more attention for this art that they feel really proud of. And so I don't know how many of them will submit or would submit, but I think I can say that several of them were very open to the idea of submitting for a larger audience. College Success Center, and then individual courses. Again, potential future partners, I'm like, it could be, maybe, who knows, one day. There's no guarantee, but this is an avenue that we can take because visual literacy can be incorporated in a variety of courses for a variety of activities. Okay, so now I'm going to have you do a visual literacy activity so that you can think about a program that you might want to do that incorporates visual literacy, or just a program that you were interested in doing. So this is something that you can do with students if you want to, but if nothing else, you can take this visual literacy strategy and help and incorporate it into your own program planning so that you are able to see the various parts of the way that your program can be laid out. So I'll go ahead and say that one of the things that I really want to do in the fall is plant and animal identification. The biology classes here do that, but one of the things that I think is really important, just like when we were looking at the piece of art and saying, well, what's going on here? What are we noticing? What's the evidence? That's the same kind of thing that you would do in plant animal identification, that you're looking at, What's the shape of the leaf? What's the coloring of the animal? Where have you seen this information before? Can you take a closer look and get more information? And that's the same kind of strategy that you would apply in research when students are looking for information. When they're doing research and they're noticing the details, are they looking at peer-reviewed articles? Are they looking at a popular source? All that behavior of noticing that's key in visual literacy is key here as well. So here is an example of what I mean when I say that visual literacy. So you've got your mind map. I'm sure some of you have done this before, but this is a way to plan out your program in a visually represented way. So you can identify problems that might happen, or campus partners, anything that you can think of. And so I did the why, the when and the where, who and how, what and what if. So the what if is like these challenges that might come up and any solutions. So I did it in different colors, and I made some notes along the way. So I'm going to give you a few minutes just to try it. And it can look any way that you want. It doesn't have to be, doesn't have to look just like this. But how would you visually represent the next program that you would like to incorporate into your library? So you can use your paper and pen and crayons and markers and just sort of work through the various steps, the connections to your community, the dates and times and locations, steps to take, people to contact, resources you need, and any solutions you might need to think of to solve problems. So I'll give you like 5 minutes to do that. Okay, so I want to ask you guys some questions just to get your feedback and your thoughts on this. But what was that experience like? Is it different than how you would normally plan a program or brainstorm for a program? And then what do you like about it and what do you not like about it? Oh, neat. Okay. Yeah. I had never even thought about that, Carrie. It's very similar to how I'd seen nursing charting care. Yeah. Well, yeah. That's so neat. I never even thought of that. And that's a great way to sort of connect nursing students to some visual literacy practices. The pre-planning, yeah, the self-preparing, preparing private, initial, open to ideas. Yeah, that's great, Anita. This is obviously something that students can do as well as they're thinking about topics or researching or whatever the case might be for them as they participate in workshops. But the sort of thing that this activity does that what we did at the beginning when we looked at the painting is that we stopped and we slowed down and we took some time to just pause. And I think that's really all students need sometimes when they are looking for information or in some circumstances trying to get the right answer for what shape is it or what does it look like. They just need to stop and pause. And visual literacy is that great way to slow down and notice things and to really take a slower approach to the information and media that they are consuming. So here are some resources. I think that I have mentioned these a little bit before, but this is the North Carolina Museum of Art, and this is their Learn page. So it's all for their education resources, and you can take a look through there. And then I created a visual literacy LibGuide that is also available. Feel free if you just want to copy and paste all that, you just feel free. That is yours to do with as you will. Those are all really great resources there. There are typically things that I found or things that we have here at the library. And then the Digital Public Library of America, they have a lot of great visual resources. They have some image collections that can be very useful as well, especially if people are working with primary sources. Primary sources are one of those things that visual literacy works really well with. Free to use and reuse. That is where I got a lot of the images for the buttons, especially for copyright. And then finally, the National Gallery of Art, they have open data access, but they also have a Learn page to sort of incorporate some educational opportunities and strategies. So that is their Learn page, but you can always explore other things as well. And then these are my references. So if you have any questions about where the art came from or what some of the citations were and want to look more deeply into them, I will say most of them are popular just because, like I said before, the idea of visual literacy in community colleges is just really limited right now. I'm sure like as soon as this presentation is done, there'll be like 45 articles out there, but I didn't see any at the time when I was preparing. At least not any that I would identify as specifically visual literacy in the library. There, you will find, if you're interested, you will find quite a number of visual rhetoric articles, particularly thinking about like composition courses in community colleges using visual rhetoric. that is an avenue if you are interested in exploring it. Okay, that's it. That's the end of the presentation for me.
Thank you so much, Morgan. And
yeah, thank you.
Thank you for sharing all these great resources, both in the slides and chat. But we have plenty of time for questions. If questions or comments, would love to hear from you. So please feel free to unmute or use chat.
Thank you, Rebecca. Yes, so the Makerspace Mondays, which were they were on the timeline. So every Monday in March, we have a 3D, I pull out the 3D printer that we have. We have a laser and photonics program here on the Harnett campus, which is where I'm at. And I would pull out the 3D printer, and one of the things that I would work on is, while it's printing a piece, typically it's printing just sort of a random piece, just a random object. I would have them look at a theme, like perspective. And we would talk about how in art, perspective looks very different across the board, whether it's you as a viewer or whether it's the piece itself, or the sort of perspective of the community. And then we would compare that with visual literacy and 3D printing. So how do pieces of art and the way we think about themes in art connect with themes in 3D printing? That was not as successful as I would have liked it to be, but I'm not ready to give up on the idea because I'm like super excited about it. So I think I'm going to try to reinvent it so that it's a little bit more effective in its execution. We've done regular feature displays done by students. They really love the involvement, applying basic research skills. Yeah, that's great, Anita. Yeah, students really love to be involved. And that is one of the things that I really had to work on, is making sure that they felt involved and it wasn't just people talking at them for these programs. Any additional examples for visual literacy activities in your teaching session? I love the activity we did at the very beginning, trying to think of ways to incorporate this into my teaching nursing students about library resources. Yes, so I tried that. The other thing might be, I try to pick pieces, like, I didn't get to do this as much as I wanted to because we were always short on time. It was always that one-shot instruction session, which is always limited. You're trying to get in as much information as possible about the library. But picking a piece that might be representative of them and for them. So maybe if there's an image or a photograph of a nurse that is particularly reflective or evocative of certain emotions, maybe, you know, I mean, there's plenty of visual things that we've gotten from COVID-19 and the ways that nurses are suited up in dealing with the pandemic. You can have students kind of open up with that discussion and kind of connect, and then use it as a way to start brainstorming keywords. So using what you're noticing, what does it make you think of? So you might think about masks, or you might think about pandemic or medical care. And then these are great keywords you can use to then research effectively within the library resources. Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. Oh, and here's my email address. I'm always happy to talk about any of this at any time, really. Yeah, and Rebecca, I really appreciate that. I love the idea of visual literacy to help them brainstorm keywords. It's very effective because I think a lot of times keywords feel very vague. It's like sort of very abstract. It's out there. Whereas if you see something in front of you, you have something a little bit more concrete to hold on to. Yes, that's a fair point, that keywords are hard to come by just in thinking about them. But when you notice things, that's when it's like, oh, it makes so much sense. Oh, thank you, Denise. Thank you.
All right, well, if there are no other questions, we can go ahead and end this session. Thank you so much, Morgan, for this
Yeah, thank
topic.
you.
Really interesting, and I look forward to learning more about, how we can support visual literacy and just add this to our practice. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.